Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to a very exciting video. Today I'm pitching the brand new BMW M2 CS against my good friend Andrea Alini's BMW M2 competition. You're probably wondering what this beautiful house is behind me. This place is actually called Fetcham Park and it's a fantastic venue for things like weddings and stuff. So I'm going to put the description of this amazing house below. An M2 competition with a DCT is roughly £54,000 on the road. An M2 CS in DCT is about £76,000 on the road. So we're talking £22,000 worth of difference of base spec cars. This one being a press car, yeah, you've guessed it, it is fully loaded. It has things like the optional carbon ceramic brakes, and the actual retail on the road price of this is £83,250-ish. So it's a lot of money, and in fact at that kind of price point it puts it in line with cars like the brilliant Cayman GT4, but we'll talk more about that down the track. I am going to be doing a comprehensive review of this car alone in a couple of days time once I'm used to it. Today's video is really going to be focusing on these two cars, and in fact tomorrow I'm going to take them out on track so we can see what the performance differences are between them, because really that's where this should come alive over the regular M2 competition. Let's start with the colour. Misano blue. I think it looks absolutely fantastic. I really like it. It's a new colour for the M2. The sunset orange you can't get on the M2 CS, so these are two unique colours for each model, if you like. Looking around the front end, it's very, very aggressive. Most of that's down to the standard fit carbon splitter, which looks very, very nice, and as far as I can tell so far doesn't sit too low, that it's actually fairly practical to use. Moving just a little bit back, the bonnet. Oh, what a stunning bonnet. And it doesn't just look good, doesn't just have a real vent in the top, it's actually a carbon fibre reinforced plastic bonnet, so it saves a lot of weight, and a lot of that weight is quite high, so very good for low centre of gravity. While we're talking about that, we'll keep walking back. Carbon fibre roof. Nothing too new on an M car. I mean, M3s and M4s, they come with standard carbon fibre roofs, but new for an M2 car out of the factory, because as many of you know, you can actually get a carbon fibre panel roof fitted to your M2 competition, but this car comes standard with the carbon fibre roof. Again, a bit less weight, and a bit less weight in the most important bit on the car, which is the highest point of the car. Control and shift sticker, of course. I mean, that's apparently standard on these as they leave the factory. I don't know, that's what I was told, but might be wrong. Now we're around the back, you can see that it's fitted with a rather large carbon fibre boot spoiler, which again is standard on the CS, and a carbon fibre rear diffuser. And I've been told that that rear diffuser actually does something with the aerodynamics. It's not just for show. We've also got a unique exhaust system on this car that is paired up to the familiar S55, which we'll talk about in a minute. The 763M wheels from BMW, I know them as the CS wheels. They're on a CS, you know, they came out first I think on the M3 and the M4 CS. Absolutely fell in love with them. On this particular press car they're black, but you can get them in gold as well, which look equally good. Very lightweight forged alloys, 19-inch, they're not too big. You've still got a nice bit of tyre there. While we're talking about tyres, these are one of my favourite in the whole world, the Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tyres. So standard sizes as we have on the M2 competition, and in fact the original M2, so 245 on the front and 265 section on the rear. You might also be able to see something else that's lurking behind these beautiful wheels, and that is the massive carbon ceramic brake option that I talked about a bit earlier. So these brakes, off memory, are about £6,300 extra as an option, and the standard ones that come on here are already an upgrade over the M2 competition. Well, actually doesn't look as impressive as my engine bay because it doesn't have a E-Venturi air intake. This is a very familiar S55 we've known this engine since back in 2014 when it came on the original M3 and M4. Unlike the one that you find under Rallini's bonnet that's been detuned, this is the full fat version. So we're talking 450 horsepower, the same torque figure, so the torque figure hasn't gone up, but they've tuned things like the M differential has been tuned specifically for this car. The traction control, the MDM, has been reworked and tuned specifically for this car. So it's a 7-speed M DCT, which we're all very familiar with, that's still in there, same box that's in this car. And it gives this particular car a claimed 0-62 figure of 4 seconds flat. So that's 0.2 of a second quicker than Rallini's car. It also has a standard but limited top speed of 174 miles an hour. So I'm in no doubt that it would reach that speed and go way beyond it if the limiter wasn't there. As we have the bonnet open, there's something else that the CS has that the competition didn't, and neither did the normal M2, and that is adaptive suspension. I can actually see the electronics on the top of the suspension mounts there. So it has a 3-way adaptive suspension, a bit like the M3 and M4 have always had. This car has now got that, and just driving it over here in comfort, it feels very pliant and very good, and it's great to see that BMW have finally fitted an adaptive system to the M2. The exhaust system, as we talked about earlier on, they say it's a reworked exhaust from the M2 competition. I don't know how reworked it is. The rear tips look different. It does sound a little bit tinier, but I can't imagine it's anything too groundbreaking, but I might be wrong. These bits of trim, now they are new to the M2 CS, but in fact they are now coming on the M2 competition as well. They're similar to the little bits of plastic that are on the M8 competition, and they're only here for regulations, yet more regulations that stipulate the wheel itself needs to be a certain amount of distance inside the furthest part of the body. Now, to cheat that rule or regulation, manufacturers are actually adding bits of plastic trim now to be able to sort of have a wider track, if you like. So although it doesn't look the best, it just means that this car has got more of a natural stance as it comes out of the factory. So we can't complain about it. It's a bit like all of the sound regulations and the OPF filters and stuff. This is stuff that manufacturers have to do to meet rules and regulations. So we're just going to have to deal with it and live with them. And I'm sure you could probably pull them off pretty easy, but I won't with this because it's not my car. A lot of people have been talking and complaining about the fact that the M2 CS is a lot of money for a 2 Series, especially when you compare it to the already brilliant M2 competition that's just over £50,000. But when you start adding up some of the individual parts on this car that you see behind me, like the carbon roof and the carbon bonnet and the lightweight 763M wheels, etc., etc., it does suddenly become a £70,000 car. And that's before you jump inside. The interior of the M2 CS, very, very familiar in here, but there are some really nice changes, some subtle and some obvious. The subtle ones are the Alcantara bits of trim. For instance, this lovely one on the dashboard that has actually got CS engraved in it. Looks really good, classy. While we're talking about Alcantara, well, we have a very nice Alcantara steering wheel, but you know what I'm going to complain about, the fact that it is a little bit on the chunky monkey side. I just find it a bit too fat. It feels a bit dead and lifeless compared to the one that I have in my M2 competition. You might be able to spot the beautiful carbon fibre centre console. Again, this is a weight saving measure. It's very similar to what was in the M3 and M4 CS, and I absolutely love it. More Alcantara, red contrasting stitching. The cabin everything just goes together so well. Then let's talk about the seats. Well, they feel very similar to the ones that are in the M2 competition, but instead of being Dakota leather, which is not the nicest leather in the world, it's quite a hard leather, these are proper merino leather seats. Now, not only does it feel nicer to touch, the merino leather itself actually gives you a bit more grip, if you like, so you don't move around in them as much as you do on the Dakota seats, which therefore make the seat itself feel like it's far more supportive. They've also got these holes in the back of them, very similar in fact to the seats that are standard fit in the M3 and M4 competition package, as it was formerly known. I think now they're called competition. Why did they change the name? Who knows? I'm going to jump in Rellini's car quickly and just for a few miles to recondition myself as to what a DCT M2 competition feels like. Then I'm going to jump in this, give you a little bit of my feedback, and then we'll fast forward to tomorrow out on track and having proper fun. Okay guys, here we are in Rellini's gorgeous M2 competition. The reason we're in this car instead of mine is partly because it has a DCT gearbox, so the same as the M2 CS, and also because this car is far more stock than my M2 competition. He has had a few things done to it, so it's been to Motec and he's had eye-back lowering springs, so it's sitting about 20-25mm lower. And it's on 12mm spacers, which gives it that really good stance, and I'm sure most of you will agree it looks very aggressive, and especially from the front end or when you're being followed by it, it just looks exceptionally good. He's actually had this car almost exactly a year and done about 8,500 miles in it, so it's reasonably well used, definitely very run-in, but it feels very tight and really nice. It feels very similar to mine. It is a bit quieter because it doesn't have a Remus exhaust, but there are still some burbles from the exhaust on the overrun and stuff, and it sounds pretty decent. He's running stock Pilot Supersport tyres, which are very good, not as grippy as the ones that are on, well, my M2 competition or the M2 CS, but the whole car on the setup feels really good. And although I love manual cars and I love my manual M2 competition, there's no denying that the DCT box is just fantastic, really is. Also got the standard brake kit, or the small brake kit if you like my car does. They work well enough for the road. I mean, they're pretty impressive. On track they can overheat and they do start to fade a little bit, but on the road they feel fantastic. Pushing on a little bit, this car feels really good. I mean, it's a very, very good road car. You're not really left for wanting anymore, if I'm being honest. It just feels great. It is a bit stiff and does skit about a little bit, but on the whole it feels and sounds pretty good. Let's jump into the M2 CS along this same stretch of road and just see what the initial differences are before we take both cars out on track tomorrow. Now we're in the CS, and I have to say, instantly the whole car feels more planted, not stiffer, just more planted. I've actually got the dampers put into comfort at the moment, which is the default mode for the UK in my opinion, and in comfort this car is far more comfortable than Rellini's M2 competition, and in fact a stock M2 competition or even original M2. It's really nice. It feels very nicely damped, which is exactly what you want in the UK. So the only time I see myself coming out of comfort and into sport or sport plus will be on track tomorrow, where I'm loading the car up a lot more and the surface is somewhat smoother. really don't like this steering wheel. It's just too thick. Look at the size of my hands, and I'm struggling to get a nice purchase on this wheel. It's just too fat. The Alcantara itself's lovely, but yeah, it's just too wide, and I wish I had my wheel in here, or even the one that Rollini has in his car. What else do I notice initially? Because remember, this is not my full-on review. This is just like an initial first drive and pitching against the M2 competition. The first thing I noticed when I hit the brake pedal is how amazingly powerful these brakes are. They have so much bite. In fact, let's just do a little into this 30 zone, and oh wow. I mean, they're brilliant. In fact, it triggered the ABS immediately because they're just overly powerful. And although I have a little bit of temperature in these Cup 2s, they tend to only operate very well once you've got sort of 35 to 40 degrees in them. And they're certainly not quite at that temperature, but they will be tomorrow on track if it stays dry. Does it feel special enough in here to be a 70 or 80 grand car? Well, it's hard to say really. I think this cabin, it is getting old now. It's effectively a 2 Series cabin that's been around for, what, 5 or 6 years. But everything's so functional, and just the little added touches of the CS badging and these seats do feel better. They feel more supportive, not just because of the merino leather, but they do feel like they are bolstered a bit more than the ones that are in my, or Rollini's M2 competition. So yeah, the cabin, it doesn't quite fit the 80 grand price tag, but it does what you want it to do, in my opinion. The driving position's pretty good. I'm sitting a little bit high, and in fact I'm worried about what it's going to be like when I've got a helmet on tomorrow. But everything else in here is lovely, and that bonnet, oh, it really dominates your view out the front window. It's just amazing, especially in this Mazzano blue. What does it sound like when you're pushing on a bit? Well, it doesn't sound really any different to Rollini's car. Maybe a little bit more induction sound, but I don't think so. And exhaust wise, well, about the same. It's actually got less of the burbles that Rollini's car's got, and I think that's probably down to ever strengthening EU laws and regulations, because Rollini's car was built over a year ago and this one was only built about 2 months ago or 3 months ago. So yeah, sound wise it does lack, and it's definitely nothing like my car with the Remus, but it's good enough, especially when you extend it a little bit in gear and you let it rev out. Talking of revving out, that's where this engine really is different to the one that's in the M2 competition. Above 5,000 RPM you can really feel those extra 40 brake horsepower, because the M2 competition tune really flattens out above that sort of RPM. So I'm guessing on track tomorrow again, when I am able to really extend it, that's where I'm going to feel the benefits and the extra horses that are hiding under that beautiful carbon blue bonnet. Okay guys, fast forward 24 hours and I am out at Landau in sunny Wales. It was actually raining this morning, and thankfully it's dried up and conditions are really, really good. So I'm in the M2 competition with my good friend Andrea Rollini. Thanks so much, mate, for letting me drive this car and now abuse it around track a little bit. What I'm aiming to do is just the one sighting lap that I'm doing now, and then pushing it a bit harder for a lap. We're not allowed to officially time lapse, but I can do that when when I'm editing, so hopefully. We get a sense of lap time. Well, she moves around a lot, but feels alive and lovely. What a car these are. It's just over 110 miles an hour through there. Oh, it moves around lovely. Just a reminder, this is on Super Sports. What a car. I'm keen to see what the CS does in comparison, because I have been in it for about the past hour out here, and to be honest, it doesn't feel any faster, and it's on Cup 2 tyres. This almost feels a bit more alive, and that's maybe to do with the ride that is stiffer and not so great on the road, but when you're on a circuit that's relatively smooth, you want as much stiffness as possible in a way, not too much, but yeah, it's gonna be interesting, gonna be very interesting. But one thing's for sure, this car is just incredible, really good for an out-of-the-box car that's been slightly lowered and has a couple of spaces on it on pretty worn Pilot Super Sports. It's a very impressive car, so yeah, just mega. Rallini, you're an absolute legend, mate. Please guys, go and follow him, because yeah, this is who lets them drive their car reasonably hard on the road and then reasonably hard on track. By the way, this is one of our straight 6 track days, very private, unique. There's only 15 of us here today, so yeah, very exciting day. Doesn't necessarily feel faster, but I have no idea because I'm not live timing, so I really don't know. It's easier to do a lap, but that's just more so because it's less on its toes and moving around. It's more stable, especially under brakes. It's just unbelievable under brakes. I've got to summarise and come up with some kind of conclusion, and I really think that the CS is a better road car than the competition. Just feels better, more composed, more stable, faster, easier to live with. On track, well, it feels very similar lap time wise, but I might be wrong. I'm going to have to conclude once I've got home. Right, I'm going to call it down. I'm not Chris Harris. I can't drive hard and talk to the camera. In fact, my glasses have even started fogging up. But yeah, I've definitely spent today trying to understand this car, because I think I jumped in it this morning with the mindset that it's going to be 2 seconds a lap faster around Landau on a circuit that's under 50 seconds long. That's just not going to happen. You know, this car is basically the same weight as a competition. It's a little bit more powerful, but it can hardly stretch its legs here. Yes, it's better on the brakes, but brakes are limited by tyres. So I think I was almost slightly disappointed this morning with this car, because I was expecting much bigger things after experiencing what it can do on the road. But spending the day in it and maybe 35-40 laps and an entire set of Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tyres, I could certainly appreciate its gains on a normal M2 competition. Is it worth an extra £22,000 on track? Probably not. But on the road, and to live with the niceties, the stuff that's in here and the stuff that's on the outside, the fact that you're far more individual than say a regular M2 or M2 competition. The next time you see me will be in a couple of days' time, when I've looked at the lap times and maybe mulled over what both of these cars are about, and we can do a quick summary, a final summary if you like. Hopefully I'll have more understanding then. So yeah, I'll see you in a couple of days. Hey guys, you joined me about 4 days after that brilliant track day at Landau. I've had a good chance to look through the footage and in fact start the edit for this video that you're watching now. So I know, and in fact you guys know now because you've seen the times, that this M2 CS is just over a second quicker than Rollini's M2 competition. Now that doesn't sound like a big margin, and it's not really, but when you consider that Landau is only a 47-48 second circuit in these cars, it's a big enough margin. And I think my main conclusion still stands that this car is the better road car. It's fantastic on the road, just like the M3 and M4 CS were, whereas the M2 competition loses little to it on the road, but loses even less on track and on circuit. And I'm sure if you put some Cup 2s on Rollini's car, it would bring that just over 1 second gap down to about half a second, and therefore roughly the same time. So there's not a massive difference between the two cars on a track, but on the road is where this car really comes alive. And also just everything you get in here, as I talked about at the start of the video, the amount of extra stuff that you get on this car over an M2 competition, it certainly justifies its price hike. And I think if you can afford one of these, then it is worth the money. I want to say a massive shout out and thanks to Adrian Flux Insurance for making sure that the M2 CS was insured out at Landau. I really think that track battle was a great comparison between the two cars, and I couldn't have done it without Adrian Flux. So please check out their link in the description below and hit it up if you need insurance for your car, whether it's on the road or on a track day. And I want to say a massive shout out and thanks to my very good friend Andrea Rollini. I know I've mentioned him a few times throughout this video, but he let me use his M2 competition on the road and on the track, and he helped me with a lot of the filming as well. So massive thanks, mate, really appreciate it. Make sure you give him a follow on Instagram. Hopefully I'll get one of these in a manual in the next couple of months, see what that's all about. Thanks for watching as always, guys. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this very long video, and leave any comments and questions below. And stay tuned for the full review on this car that I filmed a couple of days ago. It'll be coming to the channel in the next couple of weeks. Cheers.
Michelin Pilot, don't get hard on. Cup 2s. Standard. Yeah.